The night Emily Carter was rejected as wolfless, the Alpha King smelled something in her blood that made every wolf in his body go still. It happened in the great hall of Silverpine Pack, beneath a ceiling draped with white roses and moon-silver ribbons, where Emily had once dreamed she would stand beside Ryan Blackwood as his chosen mate. Instead, she stood alone at the foot of the ceremonial steps while the entire pack watched her humiliation unfold in perfect silence. Ryan stood above her in a black suit tailored for an alpha heir, one hand resting possessively near Vanessa Hale, the golden-haired she-wolf everyone had expected him to choose if he wanted power instead of love. Emily could feel every stare pressing into her skin, every whisper crawling up her spine. Wolfless. Defective. Poor Emily. Her fingers tightened around the small moon-shaped pendant hidden beneath her dress, the only thing her mother had left behind before dying on a winter night no one in the pack would talk about. Ryan's eyes did not soften when he looked at her. They were cold, polished, already belonging to someone else. "Emily Carter," he said, his voice carrying through the hall with the force of a public sentence. "I reject you as my mate. Silverpine cannot have a Luna who has no wolf." The words struck her chest so sharply that for one breath she forgot how to stand. The bond between them, thin and fragile from years of his distance, pulled tight inside her like a thread about to snap. Around her, someone laughed under their breath. Someone else murmured that Ryan had finally come to his senses. Vanessa lowered her lashes, but the curve of her mouth was not pity. It was victory. Emily tasted salt on her lips and realized she had bitten down hard enough to draw a tiny bead of blood. She did not cry. She would not give them that. But her heartbeat thundered so loudly she could barely hear the ceremonial drums fading into silence. Ryan stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough to sound merciful while still letting the front rows hear. "You were always kind, Emily, but kindness does not make a Luna. A Luna needs strength. A wolf. Heirs." The final word landed like a door, closing forever. Emily's knees weakened, but she forced herself to remain upright. All her life, she had been told that being wolfless made her less than everyone else, but hearing it from the boy who had once promised to protect her made the shame feel almost physical. Then the great doors opened. Cold night air swept into the hall, carrying the scent of pine, snow, and something darker, something royal. Every wolf in the room lowered their eyes before they even saw him. Alpha King Alexander Kane entered without hurry, dressed in midnight black, his pale hair catching the chandelier light like frost. Power moved with him so heavily that the crowd parted on instinct. Emily did not look up at first. She was too busy trying to hide the tremor in her hands, too busy wishing the floor would swallow what remained of her pride. But then the Alpha King stopped. Not near Ryan. Not near Vanessa. Directly in front of Emily. His gaze dropped to the tiny spot of blood at her lip, and the air changed. His wolf surfaced behind his silver-gray eyes, not in rage, not in hunger, but in recognition. The silence stretched until even Ryan stopped smiling. Alexander inhaled once, slow and controlled, and the muscles in his jaw tightened as if he had just discovered a secret buried under 23 years of lies. Emily's breath caught when he looked at her, truly looked at her, as though the whole room had vanished and only she remained. Then the Alpha King turned his cold gaze on Ryan Blackwood and said, "Do you have any idea what you just threw away?" Emily did not remember leaving the Great Hall. One moment the Alpha King's question was hanging over Ryan Blackwood like a blade made of ice, and the next she was being guided through a side corridor by two royal guards who did not touch her, did not mock her, did not call her wolfless under their breath. That almost frightened her more. Cruelty was familiar. Silence with respect inside it was not. The noise of the ceremony faded behind the heavy doors, replaced by the softer sounds of Silverpine Packhouse at night. The hiss of fireplaces, the distant clink of dishes from the kitchen, the low murmur of servants pretending they had not just witnessed the most shameful moment of her life. Emily kept one hand pressed to the pendant beneath her dress, as if the little crescent moon could hold her together. Her chest still ached where the rejected bond had torn loose, not with pain sharp enough to make her cry out, but with an emptiness that seemed to echo. Ryan had not just rejected her. He had explained her to the world in one sentence. No wolf. No strength. No future. The guard stopped at an old storage room near the rear hall, the place where extra linens and cracked ceremonial candles were kept. Emily knew it well. She had been sent there often as a child whenever formal pack events required pretty, strong young wolves to be seen and quiet disappointments to be hidden. One guard opened the door and bowed his head slightly. His Majesty requested that you wait here where it is private, Miss Carter. Miss Carter. Not girl. Not mistake. Not poor thing. Emily stepped inside before her face could betray how much the simple courtesy hurt. The door closed softly behind her, and the small room fell into dim gold light from a single wall lamp. Shelves rose around her, stacked with folded cloth and boxes of old decorations. The air smelled of dust, wax, and dried lavender. She stood very still until her shaking legs finally gave up, and then she sank onto a wooden bench, careful not to wrinkle the dress she had chosen that morning with such foolish hope. Pale blue, because Ryan once said it made her eyes look like winter sky. The memory made her laugh once, quietly, without humor. She had spent an hour pinning her hair. She had practiced smiling in the mirror. She had told herself that even if the pack whispered, even if Vanessa looked at her like a stain on the floor, Ryan would remember. He would remember the boy who had found her crying behind the training fields when she was 12, after the other children dared her to shift, and then howled with laughter when nothing happened. He had sat beside her in the grass and said, "Maybe your wolf is just sleeping." For years, Emily had lived on that sentence. She had carried it like a match in the dark. Tonight, he had blown it out in front of everyone. Her throat tightened, and she pressed her fingers to her lips, feeling the tiny place where her tooth had broken the skin. The bead of blood was gone now, but the memory of the Alpha King's face remained. He had not looked disgusted. He had looked stunned, almost angry, not at her, at the room, at Ryan, at something none of them had seen. Emily lowered her hand to her pendant and pulled it free. The crescent moon rested against her palm, old silver warmed by her skin. Her mother's pendant, her only inheritance. Her father had told her never to wear it where people could see. "Your mother brought enough trouble into this family," he had said when Emily was 7, his voice flat and tired. "Do not carry her ghosts around your neck." But he had never told her what trouble meant. No one did. Her mother, Evelyn Carter, was spoken of in fragments. Beautiful, sickly, strange, too quiet, too proud, gone before dawn after Emily was born. The official story was fever. The unofficial one changed depending on who was whispering. Some said Evelyn had hidden witch blood. Some said she had angered the moon goddess. Some said Emily's missing wolf was proof that whatever had been wrong with the mother had passed into the daughter. Emily had learned early not to ask. Questions made her father's mouth harden. Questions made old women cross themselves with moon signs when she passed. Questions made pack records disappear. She looked down at the pendant now and rubbed her thumb over the back. For the first time in years, she noticed the faint engraving there, almost worn smooth. Not words. A symbol, 3 curved lines beneath a full moon. Her skin prickled. She had seen that mark once before, burned into the underside of an old wooden box beneath the loose floorboard in her childhood room. The box had held nothing but a strip of white cloth and a lock of pale hair tied with thread, but when Emily touched it at 13, the birthmark at the back of her neck had heated so fiercely she had dropped it and shoved it back into hiding. Her father found out the next day. He did not yell. That was worse. He simply knelt, gripped her shoulders, and said, "Some doors stay closed, because opening them gets people buried." After that, the floorboard was nailed shut. A soft sound outside the storage room pulled Emily back to the present. Footsteps paused beyond the door, not the even steps of royal guards. These were lighter, hesitant, familiar. Her stomach sank before the door opened, and her father slipped inside. Thomas Carter looked older than he had that morning, his brown hair threaded with gray, his formal jacket buttoned wrong, as if he had dressed in a hurry. For one impossible second, Emily wanted him to cross the room and hold her. She wanted him to say Ryan was wrong. The pack was cruel. She was his daughter, and not a shame he had been forced to endure. Instead, his eyes went straight to the pendant in her hand, and his face lost color. "Put that away," he whispered. Emily closed her fingers around it. "Why?" His gaze darted toward the door. "Because people are looking at you now. Important people. Dangerous people." A cold, hollow understanding spread through her. "You are not here because Ryan rejected me." Thomas looked away. That was answer enough. Emily stood slowly. The ache in her chest was still there, but something steadier rose beneath it. Not a wolf. Never a wolf. Just a tired girl finally too wounded to keep pretending fear was love. What was my mother? She asked. Her father flinched as if the question had crossed the room and touched him. She was your mother. That is not an answer. It is the only safe one. The lamp flickered. For a second, Emily thought it was the draft. Then the pendant warmed in her fist, pulsing once like a hidden heartbeat. Thomas saw her reaction, and terror moved across his face so quickly she almost missed it. Not anger. Not shame. Terror. Before he could speak again, voices rose in the hallway outside. Royal voices. Controlled voices. Someone was giving orders, and every person nearby obeyed without question. Thomas stepped back from Emily as though distance could erase whatever he had just revealed. The door opened, and a tall royal guard stood there, silver crest bright on his uniform. Miss Carter, he said, with another respectful bow that made her father stare. His Majesty has ordered the Silverpine birth archives sealed. Your records are missing. Emily's breath caught. Behind the guard, down the corridor washed in moonlight, Alpha King Alexander Kane stood speaking to his captain, his expression carved from winter. Then he looked toward Emily, and the pendant in her hand turned warm enough to make her gasp. Alexander heard it. His eyes lifted to hers. Across 30 feet of shadowed hallway, with her father frozen behind her, and her old life collapsing under the weight of secrets, Emily saw the Alpha King inhale once more. This time, he did not look surprised. He looked certain. The order came before midnight. Silverpine Pack was to surrender Emily Carter to royal custody until the missing records, the sealed archives, and the strange reaction of her mother's pendant could be investigated by the king's court. Ryan argued first, because Ryan always knew how to make selfishness sound like duty. He stood in the corridor outside the storage room with Vanessa at his side, his jaw tight, his pride bruised more deeply than any bond he had broken. Your Majesty, he said, bowing just enough to be polite and not enough to look humble. With respect, Emily is still a member of my pack. If there is an issue with her family records, Silverpine can resolve it internally. Alexander Kane did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The hallway itself seemed to listen when he spoke. You rejected her publicly as unfit for your pack. Do not pretend ownership now that I have asked a question you cannot answer. Emily stood a few steps behind the royal guard, fingers curled around the warm crescent pendant. She should have felt relieved. Instead, fear moved through her in slow waves. Men with power had decided where she belonged all her life. Her father had hidden her. Ryan had discarded her. The pack had named her broken. Now the Alpha King was claiming the right to take her away. And even if his voice held no cruelty, Emily could not forget that kings did not ask because they were used to being obeyed. Vanessa's perfume drifted through the corridor, sweet as sugared flowers, sharp enough to sting. No one is trying to own her, Vanessa said. Smoothly, her blue eyes sliding over Emily with polished concern. We are worried for her. She has had a difficult night. Surely dragging a wolfless girl to royal court will only frighten her. Alexander turned his head slightly. The motion was small, but Vanessa's smile faltered as if winter had touched the room. Use that word for her again, he said, calm as snowfall. And you will explain to my council why Silverpine teaches its future Luna to insult guests under royal protection. Color rose in Vanessa's cheeks. Ryan stepped forward, but stopped when Alexander's captain moved one gloved hand to the silver crest at his chest. Not a threat, a reminder. The difference was enough. Emily's throat tightened. Royal protection. The words should have felt comforting, but they settled over her like clothing borrowed from someone braver. She looked at her father. Thomas Carter stood near the wall, pale and silent, his eyes fixed on the pendant as though it were a candle burning too close to dry paper. If he had begged the king to leave her, she might have hated him less. If he had begged to go with her, she might have broken entirely. But he only looked afraid of what she was becoming in other people's eyes. Alexander finally looked at Emily. The force of his attention stole the air from her lungs, not because it was harsh, but because it did not slide away. Most people looked at her briefly, then through her, as if her lack of a wolf made her unfinished. Alexander looked as though he could see the outline of a truth buried under her skin. Miss Carter, he said, and the title sounded different in his mouth, formal but not distant. You will not be taken anywhere against your will. My court can protect you while we investigate. Silverpine cannot. Ryan let out a humorless breath. Protect her from what? This time, Emily answered before anyone else could. Her voice was quiet, but it did not shake. From people who keep losing every record that has my mother's name on it. Silence landed hard. Thomas closed his eyes. Vanessa's expression sharpened. Ryan stared at Emily as if he had forgotten she knew how to speak when no one gave her permission. Something unreadable moved across Alexander's face, then disappeared behind royal control. Prepare the carriage, he told his captain. We leave within the hour. Emily was given 10 minutes to collect whatever belonged to her. It was almost funny how little that was. In her small room under the east stairs, she packed 2 dresses, a brush, the old white cloth from beneath the floorboard, and the lock of pale hair tied with thread. Her hands moved quickly, but every object carried a memory sharp enough to catch. The chipped mug she had used since 16. The training schedule Ryan once promised to change so she would not have to scrub floors while others learned to fight. The little blue ribbon she had almost worn tonight before deciding it looked too hopeful. She left that behind. When she stepped outside, Alexander was waiting at the end of the servant corridor, alone. The sight of him there, too tall and too royal for the narrow passage, made the walls seem smaller. Your father will not come, he said, not unkindly. Emily's fingers tightened around her bag. I know. Does that hurt? No one had asked her that all night. The question slipped past her defenses so easily that she almost told the truth. Instead, she looked down at the worn floorboards and said, It is not new. Alexander was silent for a moment. Then he removed his black overcoat and held it out. The temperature has dropped below 20 degrees. The ride will be cold. Emily stared at the coat. It was finely made, heavy, lined with dark wool, carrying the scent of pine forest after snow. I have a shawl. I did not ask whether you had learned to survive with less than you needed. Her breath caught. Slowly, because some frightened part of her still expected laughter, she accepted the coat. Warmth settled around her shoulders, and with it came his scent, deep and clean and strangely steady. Somewhere beneath her ribs, in the place where a wolf should have been, something answered with a faint silver pull. Emily froze. Alexander noticed. Of course he did. What did you feel? He asked softly. Nothing, she said too quickly. His eyes held hers, silver gray and impossible to lie to. Emily, her name in his voice, felt dangerous, not because it threatened her, but because it asked her to stop disappearing. She swallowed. Warmth. For a second, like something heard you. Alexander's jaw tightened, and a flicker of gold passed through his eyes before he turned away. Outside, the royal carriage waited beneath the winter moon, black lacquer shining, horses breathing mist into the cold. Silverpine wolves had gathered at a careful distance, whispering behind their hands. Emily saw Ryan near the steps. Vanessa pressed close to his side, both of them watching as if the girl they had thrown away had somehow become evidence in a trial they had not prepared for. Alexander helped Emily into the carriage without touching more than her gloved hand. A small courtesy, and still it made the whispers stop. As the door closed, Emily looked through the window at the pack house where she had spent 23 years trying to be small enough to tolerate. The carriage rolled forward. No one ran after her. No one called her back. She told herself that was freedom. It felt too much like grief. Across from her, Alexander sat in shadow, his broad shoulders still, his gaze turned toward the passing trees. For several minutes, only the wheels over the frozen road filled the silence. Then the first howl rose from the woods. The horses shifted. The driver murmured a command. Emily leaned toward the glass and saw dark shapes moving between the pines, not attacking, only following. Rogues, maybe. Or scouts. Her pulse jumped. Alexander did not look worried. He looked irritated, as though danger had chosen an inconvenient hour. Stay inside, he said. Emily should have obeyed. She meant to. But then one of the shapes stumbled into a strip of moonlight, smaller than the others, trembling, its eyes wide with fear rather than malice. Without thinking, Emily pressed one hand against the carriage window. That one is scared. Alexander's eyes snapped to her. You can tell. I do not know how. The small wolf outside lifted its head, and for one breath, Emily felt its panic brush against her own heart like cold fur. She gasped. Alexander leaned forward, his control cracking just enough for his wolf to show in. His eyes, The carriage seemed suddenly too small for the power inside it. But when Emily reached out blindly and touched his wrist, not to restrain him, only to steady herself, the force in him quieted. Instantly. Completely. Alexander went still. Emily pulled her hand back as if she had done something forbidden. He stared at the place her fingers had been, then at her face. Outside, the frightened wolf lowered itself calmly into the snow. Alexander's voice, when he spoke, was low enough that she almost did not hear it over the wheels. My wolf has not obeyed anyone's touch in 15 years. Emily's heart hammered. I did not mean to. That is what concerns me, he said. And in the dark glass of the carriage window, Emily saw the reflection of her pendant glowing faintly beneath the king's coat. The royal palace appeared just before dawn, rising from the northern cliffs like something carved from moonstone in winter. Emily saw it first through the carriage window as the trees opened and the road curved toward the sea, its towers pale against the dim blue sky, its banners snapping in the cold wind, its windows glowing with the last gold of night fires. Silverpine Pack House had always seemed large to her, but this was not large. This was a kingdom made of stone. Her fingers tightened around the edge of Alexander's coat, still wrapped around her shoulders, still holding his scent in every fold. She had not slept during the ride. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Orion's mouth forming the rejection again, saw her father's face when the pendant warmed, saw the small wolf outside the carriage lowering calmly into the snow after one accidental touch. Alexander had not spoken much after that. He had only watched the dark woods through the window, one hand resting near his knee, too controlled to look restless and too still to be peaceful. When the carriage stopped beneath the palace archway, servants in gray and silver uniforms lined the steps. Emily braced for whispers. She had lived long enough among wolves to recognize the quick glance, the lifted brow, the little silence that meant people had already decided what she was. But as Alexander stepped down, every servant bowed. When he turned and offered Emily his hand, they bowed to her too. Her breath caught so sharply it hurt. No one here knew her. No one here had seen her scrub floors after packed dinners or stand at the edge of training fields pretending she did not want to join. No one here had called her broken yet. The thought should have comforted her. Instead, it made her feel as if she were walking across thin ice, waiting for the crack. She placed her gloved hand in Alexander's. His fingers closed around hers for only a moment, steady and formal, but warmth moved up her arm in a quiet silver thread. She pulled back as soon as her feet touched the ground. Alexander noticed. He always noticed. You are safe here, he said. Emily looked up at the palace doors, where two carved wolves held a crown between them. People keep saying safe when they mean watched. Something almost like approval softened his eyes. Then I will be precise. You are protected here. You will also be watched, because my court fears what it does not understand. And you? She asked before she could stop herself. His gaze dropped briefly to the pendant hidden beneath the coat. I understand less than I should. That is why I fear more than I want to. The honesty unsettled her more than a lie would have. Inside, the palace smelled of cedar wood, polished marble, and old smoke from 100 winter hearths. Their footsteps echoed across a hall so wide that Emily felt smaller with every step. Portraits lined the walls, kings and queens with proud faces and pale wolves painted at their sides. Some of the queens wore the same moon symbol engraved on Emily's pendant, 3 curved lines beneath a full moon. She slowed without meaning to. Alexander stopped beside her. You recognize it. Emily swallowed. I found it on something that belonged to my mother. His expression closed, not with coldness, but calculation. Do not say that where the walls can carry it. Before she could ask what that meant, an older woman approached from the far end of the hall, her silver hair braided down her back, her posture straight as a drawn line. She wore heelers white beneath a dark blue cloak, and when she bowed to Alexander, there was affection beneath the respect. Your Majesty, the eastern rooms are prepared. Then her gaze moved to Emily, and the woman went very still. Not shocked like the pack had been, not curious like the servants. Grieved. Emily felt the old instinct rise, the urge to apologize for being a problem before anyone named her one. This is Emily Carter, Alexander said. She is under royal protection. No one enters her rooms without her permission or mine. The healer's eyes glistened for 1 second before she lowered them. Of course. Emily looked between them. Have we met? The woman's hands folded tightly in front of her. No, child. But I knew someone with your eyes. The words slipped under Emily's ribs and found a place already bruised. Her mother. It had to be. But Alexander's warning still hung in the air, so Emily held the question behind her teeth until it burned. The eastern rooms were not rooms. They were a suite larger than her entire corner of Silverpine Pack House, with tall windows facing the sea, a fireplace already lit, shelves of books, a bath behind frosted glass doors, and a bed draped in soft white linen. On the mantel stood a vase of moonflowers, their petals closed for daylight. Emily stared at everything in growing alarm. There has been a mistake. The healer, whose name Alexander finally gave as Margaret Vale, paused near the wardrobe. Is something missing? No. That is the problem. Emily turned to Alexander. I cannot stay here. Why not? Because this is not a guest room. His silence answered too late. Heat rose in her face. What is it? Margaret looked at the king, then carefully away. Alexander removed his gloves with unnecessary precision. Traditionally, these rooms belonged to the royal Luna before coronation. The floor seemed to tilt. Emily took one step back. I am not that. I did not say you were. You put me in her room. I put you in the only wing of this palace protected by wards older than the council. His voice remained even, but something tired passed beneath it. If your blood is what I think it might be, ordinary locks will not be enough. Emily wanted to argue, but the pendant warmed. Again, faintly, like it recognized the walls. Margaret noticed and crossed the room with careful slowness. May I see it? Emily hesitated. Alexander did not command her. He did not even nod. He simply waited, letting the choice remain in her hands. That more than anything made her unclasp the chain. The moment the crescent pendant touched Margaret's palm, the moonflowers on the mantel opened all at once. Emily stopped breathing. Margaret whispered something too soft to catch and nearly dropped the pendant. Alexander moved, catching the older woman by the elbow before she could sway. It was the first unguarded kindness Emily had seen from him, quick and instinctive. Margaret recovered fast, but her face had gone pale. Where did you get this? It was my mother's. What was her name? Emily looked at Alexander. He gave the smallest shake of his head, but she was done being protected by silence that looked too much like a cage. Evelyn Carter. Margaret closed her eyes. The room became unbearably quiet. Before anyone could speak, a sound moved through the palace, low and distant, like a wounded note drawn from stone. Alexander stiffened. The air changed around him. His shoulders locked, his jaw tightening as his hand pressed briefly against the edge of the mantel. Emily felt the pressure before she understood it, a wave of restless power rolling through the room, making the fire shiver and the glass tremble softly in its frame. Margaret stepped toward him. Your Majesty, not now. Alexander's eyes flashed gold. Leave. The word was controlled, but strained. Servants in the corridor scattered. Margaret did not move. It has been getting worse. Margaret. His voice dropped, and Emily saw it then. Not rage, not danger, but pain held behind a wall of discipline so strong it looked like anger from the outside. The Alpha King was suffering. The realization stole the fear from her chest and replaced it with something gentler, more foolish. What is happening to him? She asked. Margaret's face tightened. Royal Alpha madness. It comes when power has no true Luna bond to steady it. He has carried it alone for years. Alexander turned away as if the admission itself was an insult. Emily should have stayed where she was. She should have remembered she was a rejected girl in a room that did not belong to her, standing before a king who could make entire courts kneel. But the sound in the walls trembled again, and with it came a memory so old she did not know she still had it. Her mother's voice in the dark, singing softly while snow tapped the window. Emily sang the first line before she could think. The words were not English, not fully, but they rose from somewhere deeper than memory. Margaret went still. Alexander's breathing changed. The gold in his eyes dimmed, then softened, his hand lowering from the mantel as the pressure in the room eased. The fire steadied. The glass fell silent. Emily stopped, horrified by what she had done. Alexander slowly turned to face her. The distance between them felt thinner than air. Margaret whispered behind her, voice shaking. That song was forbidden before you were born. Emily's mouth went dry. My mother used to sing it to me. Alexander looked at the open moonflowers, the glowing pendant, then at Emily as though every answer he had feared had just taken one step closer. Then your mother was not who Silverpine said she was. By morning, the royal palace no longer felt like a sanctuary. It felt like a place holding its breath. Emily sensed it before anyone told her. In the way servants lowered their voices when they passed the eastern wing. In the way Margaret Vale kept glancing toward the doors. In the way Alexander stood at the window with his hands clasped behind his back, watching the gray sea crash against the cliffs below. He had not slept. Neither had she. After the forbidden song had quieted the strange pressure in the room, no one had known what to say. Margaret had taken the pendant for a brief examination, then returned it with fingers that trembled too much for comfort. Alexander had ordered guards posted discreetly outside Emily's suite, not because she was a prisoner, he said, but because the court would begin asking questions the moment the council woke. He had been right. By breakfast, 3 council messengers had arrived. By 10 o'clock, the royal court had been summoned to the moon chamber. By noon, Vanessa Hale walked into the palace dressed in white as if she were attending a coronation instead of bringing ruin. Emily saw her from the upper gallery, one hand resting on the cold marble rail. Vanessa moved through the entrance hall with Ryan at her side and 6 Silverpine elders behind her. She looked beautiful, composed, and wounded in exactly the way people believed when they wanted a noble villain to look like a victim. In her gloved hands, she carried a long, narrow box of dark wood sealed with silver thread. Emily's stomach sank before she knew why. Alexander appeared beside her so quietly that she almost startled. You do not have to attend. Emily kept her eyes on the hall below. If they are here because of me, hiding will only make me look guilty. The court does not decide truth by courage. No, she said softly. But I need to remember I have some. He looked at her then, and whatever he saw in her face made his expression shift, not into warmth exactly, but into something steadier than approval. Then stand beside me, not behind me. The moon chamber was built beneath a glass dome, open to the pale winter sky, with 12 high-backed council seats circling a floor of white stone veined in silver. Emily felt the weight of every gaze when she entered with Alexander. Some courtiers looked curious. Some looked offended. Some looked afraid in the quiet, careful way powerful people feared anything that might rearrange the world they benefited from. Ryan stood near the center, his jaw tight, eyes avoiding Emily's until he realized everyone could see him avoiding her. Vanessa stepped forward first, lowering into a graceful bow. Your Majesty, forgive the intrusion. I would not have come so urgently if the safety of the court were not at risk. Alexander sat on the black stone throne at the head of the chamber, but Emily remained standing to his right, exactly where he had told her to stand. The position made whispers bloom around the room. Vanessa noticed. Her mouth tightened for less than a second. Speak clearly, Alexander said. Vanessa lifted the dark wooden box. Last night, you removed Emily Carter from Silverpine under suspicion that her bloodline had been hidden. We believe it was hidden for good reason. Margaret, standing near the healer's bench, went very still. Emily felt the pendant at her throat cool against her skin. Vanessa broke the silver thread and opened the box. Inside lay an old ceremonial knife wrapped in faded white cloth, its handle carved with the same 3 curved lines beneath the moon. Emily's breath caught, not because of the blade itself, but because the cloth beneath it matched the strip she had brought from the loose floorboard in her room. Vanessa's voice softened into something almost sorrowful. This belonged to Evelyn Carter, Emily's mother. Silverpine records confirm Evelyn was not merely strange, as some have claimed. She practiced forbidden Luna magic. She betrayed her pack, endangered its bloodlines, and left behind a daughter who may carry the same corruption. The chamber erupted in murmurs. Emily could feel every word landing on her skin like ash. Forbidden, betrayed, corruption, old names for the same shame, dressed up for a better room. Ryan finally looked at her, and for one strange second, he seemed almost regretful. Then he spoke, and the regret turned out to be fear wearing a nicer face. Emily, I wish this were not true. I wanted to handle this quietly. That is why Silverpine kept the matter private for years. Emily stared at him. Last night, he had called her unfit because she had no wolf. Today, he called her dangerous because she might have something more. The contradiction was so cruel, it almost made her laugh. Alexander leaned back in his throne, eyes cold. How convenient that Silverpine's missing records reappear only in the hands of the woman who benefits from Miss Carter's disgrace. Vanessa's lashes lowered. I benefit from stability, Your Majesty. We all do. One of the counselors, Lord Hartwell, cleared his throat. He was an older man with silver rings on every finger and the look of someone who had never apologized without gaining something from it. If there is a possibility of forbidden blood influence, the court cannot ignore it, especially after last night's unusual disturbance in the Eastern Wing. Emily's pulse jumped. They knew about the song. Of course they knew. Palaces breathed secrets through stone. Margaret stepped forward. The disturbance was contained. No harm came to anyone. Contained by whom? Lord Hartwell asked. Silence tightened. Vanessa's eyes flicked toward Emily, bright with satisfaction. The trap closed so neatly that Emily could almost admire it. If she had no power, she was worthless. If she had power, she was a threat. Either way, they had built a cage and called it truth. Alexander's hand curled once against the arm of his throne. The room chilled. Emily sensed the pressure in him rising, not the full wave from the night before, but a warning tremor beneath the floor of his control. She could also sense the court waiting for it, hoping he would act from anger so they could blame her for that too. Her throat went dry. She stepped forward before fear could stop her. I do not know what my mother was, she said. Her voice echoed beneath the glass dome, small but clear. I do not know why my records are missing. I do not know why my pendant reacts to this palace, or why a song I barely remembered frightened half this room. But I do know this. Silverpine called me wolfless when that made me easy to discard. Now they call me dangerous because His Majesty looked twice. Their story changes whenever my shame stops serving them. The chamber fell silent. Alexander's gaze moved to her, sharp and unreadable. Vanessa recovered first. Pretty words do not cleanse blood. No, Emily said, turning to face her. But neither do pretty lies. A few courtiers shifted. Ryan's face darkened. Vanessa's gloved fingers tightened around the box. For the first time since arriving, she looked less polished. Then prove it, Vanessa said. If she claims there is no corruption, let her stand for a blood trial under moon law. Margaret inhaled sharply. Alexander rose. The entire chamber went still. No, the word landed with royal finality. But Lord Hartwell stood too, slower, careful, hiding ambition behind law. Your Majesty, if Miss Carter may be connected to a forbidden Luna line, refusing a lawful trial will only deepen suspicion. Until she is cleared, court protocol forbids any royal claim, protection beyond custody, or recognition of status. Recognition of status. Emily understood then. This was not only about proving whether she was cursed. It was about preventing Alexander from naming her anything before they could bury the truth. Alexander's eyes had gone fully silver. You speak of protocol to me as if I did not write half the laws you hide behind. Then you know the old ones still bind even kings, Hartwell replied. The pressure in the chamber rose again. Emily could feel Alexander's wolf pushing against his restraint, not out of cruelty, but fury sharpened by helplessness. She did the only thing she could think to do. She reached back, not touching him, not publicly, only letting her fingers hover near the edge of his sleeve. The pressure eased by a fraction. Alexander did not look at her, but she knew he felt it. Everyone did. Vanessa's eyes widened, then narrowed with sudden understanding. Emily had just revealed more than she meant to. Margaret closed her eyes as if praying. I will do it, Emily said. Alexander turned on her. No, this time, the word was not a command. It was fear. That almost broke her. But Emily lifted her chin, feeling the weight of 23 years of silence, storage rooms, lowered eyes, and names she had never deserved. They already judged me once in a room full of people, she said softly. Let them watch me answer. The moon chamber did not breathe. Vanessa smiled again, but it was thinner now. Lord Hartwell nodded, satisfied. Ryan looked away. Alexander stared at Emily as though she had stepped to the edge of a cliff he could not pull her back from without becoming the very cage she feared. At last, he said, low enough that only she could hear. Blood trial requires you to call your wolf beneath the moon. Emily's chest tightened. There it was. The impossible thing. The wound beneath every wound. She had no wolf to call. She had never had one. But the pendant at her throat warmed, slow and steady, And somewhere deep inside the emptiness Ryan had mocked all her life, something stirred like a silver eye opening in the dark. Vanessa closed the wooden box with a soft click. Then tonight, she said, her voice sweet enough to poison tea, we will all see what Emily Carter truly is. By the time moonrise silvered the glass dome above the moon chamber, Emily Carter had learned that waiting could be its own kind of trial. She had spent the afternoon in the Eastern Suite with Margaret Vale, listening to the old healer explain the rules in a voice too gentle to hide the danger beneath them. A blood trial did not care what a person wanted to be. It answered only what the blood remembered. At moonrise, Emily would stand barefoot on the moonstone, speak her full name, and call the wolf inside her. If a wolf answered, the court would see its mark in the stone. If nothing answered, Lord Hartwell could declare her blood unstable, unclaimed, and subject to confinement until the council decided what kind of threat she might become. Margaret did not say the last part at first. Emily made her. The truth landed cold in her stomach, but not unexpectedly. Powerful people always found elegant words for locking doors. Alexander had not come to her rooms after the council dismissed them. She told herself that was better. If he came, she might look at him and remember the way his voice had changed when he said no. Not command. Fear. She could not afford to carry his fear with her. She had enough of her own. So she dressed herself in the simple white gown Margaret provided, tied her mother's pendant at her throat, and brushed her hair until her hands stopped shaking. When Margaret offered slippers, Emily refused. If the stone wants the truth, she said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice, then I should not stand on it pretending I am not afraid. Margaret's eyes softened. Your mother said something very much like that once. Emily looked up sharply, but before she could ask, the bells began to ring. Not loud, not celebratory. 3 low notes that rolled through the palace like a warning. The moon chamber was already full when Emily entered. Courtiers lined the circular walls in dark silks and winter jewels. Counselors sat in their high-backed seats, faces solemn, hands folded over secrets. Ryan stood with the Silverpine elders, his expression carefully empty. Vanessa waited near Lord Hartwell, white dress gleaming under the moonlight as if innocence could be tailored. Alexander stood beside the throne instead of sitting on it. Somehow that was worse. A seated king judged. A standing alpha looked ready to tear the world open with law alone. His eyes found Emily the moment she entered, and the noise inside her quieted by a fraction. He did not smile. He did not move toward her, but he placed one hand over his heart in a small formal gesture of respect, and the chamber noticed. Whispers stirred. Vanessa's mouth tightened. Emily walked to the center of the room. The moonstone was colder than she expected beneath her bare feet, a smooth white circle veined with silver lines that seemed to run deeper than stone. Above her, the glass dome revealed a full moon, so bright it turned every face pale. Lord Hartwell rose with a scroll in hand. Emily Evelyn Carter of Silverpine Pack, daughter of Thomas Carter and Evelyn Carter, you stand under Old Moon law to answer the question of your blood. Do you consent to the trial? Her mother's name echoed through the chamber. Emily felt it like a hand at her back. I consent. Then call your wolf. Such a small command. Such an impossible one. Emily closed her eyes. All her life, people had described the first call as instinct, a door inside the chest opening to fur, breath, heartbeat, another self waiting in the dark. Emily had searched for that door at 12, while other children shifted for the first time and ran under the trees. She had searched again at 16 after Ryan kissed her forehead and said patience as if patience could grow teeth and claws. She had searched every birthday after, every full moon, every lonely night when shame became too heavy to carry as a human girl alone. She had found nothing. Now the whole court waited for that nothing to answer. Emily inhaled. Wolf, she whispered inside herself. Silence. Her fingers curled at her sides. Please. The stone remained cold. A murmur moved through the chamber, soft as spreading frost. Emily opened her eyes and saw Ryan look down. Not triumphantly. Worse. With pity. Vanessa stepped forward. Just enough for moonlight to catch her perfect face. A Luna without a wolf, she said, her voice sweet and clear, is only a girl taught to mistake longing for destiny. The words should have broken something. Instead, they burned. Emily looked at the woman who had taken Ryan's arm, taken her place, taken the story and twisted it into something pretty enough for court. "You are wrong," Emily said, though she did not yet know why. Vanessa smiled. "Then call it." Emily tried again. She reached inward until her breath shook, until the emptiness inside her felt endless. Nothing came. No growl. No warmth. No hidden paws moving through shadow. The silence inside her remained as it had always been, and for one terrible moment, she was 12 again, standing in the training field while the pack children laughed. Her throat tightened. The moonstone blurred beneath tears she refused to let fall. Then Alexander's voice reached her, low and steady from the edge of the circle. "Emily." She looked at him. He had not stepped forward, though every line of his body said he wanted to. His wolf flickered behind his eyes, held back by will strong enough to shake the air. "Breathe," he said. "Your blood knew me before your fear did." The chamber went utterly still. Emily did breathe then. Once. Twice. The pendant at her throat warmed. Not like fire. Like memory. Her mother's song stirred at the edge of her mind. The forbidden lullaby that had quieted Alexander. The melody that had lived in her bones long after she forgot the words. Emily did not sing aloud. She let the rhythm move through her silently, down through her chest, her ribs, her hands, into the cold stone beneath her feet. The silver veins in the moonstone flickered. Lord Hartwell leaned forward. Vanessa's smile vanished. Emily felt it then, not a wolf rising, but a wall. Something old and sealed inside her, not empty at all. Hidden, guarded, sleeping behind a door someone had built in fear and love. Her eyes flew open. "It is not gone," she whispered. Margaret covered her mouth with one trembling hand. "What is not gone?" Lord Hartwell demanded. Emily did not answer him. She knelt on the moonstone, removed the pendant from her neck, and pressed its crescent point against her palm. Not hard enough to harm. Only enough for one bright drop of blood to well beneath the moonlight. Gasps sounded around the room. Alexander took one step forward before stopping himself with visible effort. The drop fell onto the stone. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the moonstone lit from within. Silver lines blazed outward in a perfect circle, not beneath Emily's feet but around her, spiraling into symbols older than any crest in the palace. The glass dome hummed. The moonflowers woven into the court garlands opened all at once. A hidden seam appeared across the center of the stone, glowing brighter and brighter until letters rose through the light, as if the rock itself had remembered how to speak. Evelyn Carter. True Luna of the White Moon Line. Silenced, not fallen. Murdered, not traitor. The chamber broke into chaos, but Emily heard none of it. She stared at her mother's name, her heartbeat roaring in her ears, every lie of her childhood cracking open beneath that silver glow. Ryan staggered back as if the words had reached him first. Vanessa went white. Lord Hartwell shouted for order, but his voice sounded far away. Emily's hands trembled over the stone. She had come expecting to prove she was not cursed. Instead, the moon had answered with a grave. Alexander crossed the chamber then, law or no law, and stopped at the edge of the glowing circle. He did not touch her. He only lowered himself to one knee so she would not have to look up at him while her world collapsed. His voice was quiet, dangerous in its restraint. "Emily, look at me." She did, barely able to breathe. In his silver eyes she saw no pity, no fear of her, no disgust at what the court had uncovered. Only recognition, fierce and unwavering. Behind them, Vanessa whispered, "That is impossible." The moonstone answered before anyone else could. A second line of letters burned beneath the first, brighter than the last. Heir preserved by blood seal. Wolf bound until the king remembers. The pressure in the room vanished. So did every whisper. Emily felt the wall inside her shudder. Somewhere in the deepest dark of herself. Something opened one silver eye. The silver eye inside Emily opened, and the whole chamber seemed to fall away from her. Sound thinned until the shouts of the council became distant and muffled, as if she were underwater beneath a frozen lake. The moonstone glowed beneath her knees, warm now instead of cold, its silver veins pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. Emily looked down at the words burning through the stone, heir preserved by blood seal, wolf bound until the king remembers, and felt something inside her answer with a sadness so old it did not feel like her own. It was not a growl. It was not the fierce, clear call other wolves described. It was a breath behind a locked door. A presence. Waiting. hidden not because it was weak, but because someone had wrapped it in silence and prayer. Margaret Vale stepped into the circle despite Lord Hartwell's sharp command to stay back. Tears lined the old healer's face, but her voice was steady when she spoke. I was there the night Evelyn Carter disappeared from court. Every eye turned to her. Alexander rose slowly from one knee, but he did not move away from Emily. He stood at the edge of the glowing circle like a shield that had chosen restraint only because Emily still needed truth more than vengeance. Margaret faced the council. Her name was not Evelyn Carter then. She was Evelyn of the White Moon line, recognized by the old rites, chosen by the Moon Stone, and hidden from public record after the council declared her bloodline unstable. Lord Hartwell's face tightened. Careful, healer. Margaret looked at him with a grief that had sharpened into courage. I was careful for 23 years. That is long enough. Emily's breath trembled. Her mother had not been strange. Not a shame. Not a fever story whispered in kitchens. She had been someone important enough to erase. Vanessa stepped back, her white skirt brushing the stone floor. This is absurd. White Moon line died out generations ago. The moonstone flared at her words, and the crescent pendant in Emily's palm lifted slightly, pulled by some invisible tide. Margaret pointed toward the old ceremonial box Vanessa had brought. That box was not evidence against Evelyn. It was hers. The cloth inside was a sealing wrap, used only when a Luna mother bound her child's wolf to hide its scent. Emily pressed one hand to her chest. My mother bound my wolf. The question came out small, almost childlike. Margaret turned to her, and all the court vanished from the healer's face. Only sorrow remained. To save you. A White Moon Luna can steady alpha blood, calm madness, and break false bonds. Men who built power on unstable packs feared that. Your mother knew they would look for her child. So she hid the strongest part of you where no one cruel enough to hunt it could reach. Emily closed her eyes. For years she had thought the emptiness inside her was proof that something was missing. Now she understood it had been a locked room built by a dying mother's love. The realization hurt more than shame. Shame had been familiar. Love this fierce was not. Alexander's voice cut through the chamber, low and controlled. Who ordered the erasure? No one answered. The silence became a living thing. Then the moonstone answered for them. New lines of light spread outward, forming names in a circle around Emily. Old council houses. Pack bloodlines. Silverpine elders. Hale. Blackwood. Hartwell. The chamber recoiled as if the stone had spoken aloud. Vanessa made a soft sound. Not quite a gasp, not quite denial. Ryan stared at his own family name until the color drained from his face. Lord Hartwell slammed his ringed hand against the council rail. Enough. The stone is reacting to emotional influence. This trial is compromised. Alexander turned his head, and the room chilled by several degrees. You stood on old law when it served you. Do not insult it now that it names you. Hartwell's mouth opened, but no words came. Emily looked at the glowing names. Hale. Blackwood. The families that had shaped her life, judged her worth, pitted her silence, had been standing on a secret grave all along. Vanessa recovered first because pride gave cruel people remarkable balance. Even if some ancient mistake was made, that does not make her Luna. Her wolf has not risen. She cannot shift. She cannot stand beside a king because a stone. Feel sorry for her. The words struck, but they no longer landed in the same place. Emily felt the presence inside her stir behind its seal, not breaking free, not yet, but listening. Alexander stepped closer to Vanessa, stopping well outside the circle. You are very eager for the only witness who cannot lie to be dismissed. Vanessa lifted her chin. I am eager to protect the throne from a girl who has spent one night in a palace and somehow convinced everyone she is sacred. Ryan moved then, too fast in intention if not in action, crossing several steps toward Emily with his hands lifted as if gentleness could undo humiliation. Emily, listen to me. We can fix this. If your blood is valuable, Silverpine can protect you. I made a mistake last night, but a rejection can be challenged before final severance. We were mates first. The old Emily might have broken at those words. Not because she believed him, but because some younger part of her still remembered the boy in the grass saying her wolf was only sleeping. But the man walking toward her now did not see her. He saw what rejecting her might cost him. Alexander's wolf flashed behind his eyes, bright and furious, but Emily lifted one hand before the king could speak. He stopped. So did Ryan. The entire chamber watched her discover the power of a raised hand from a woman they had called powerless. "You do not want me back," Emily said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried through every inch of stone and moonlight. "You want the thing you threw away to still belong to you now that it has value." Ryan flinched. "That is not fair. Neither was making my shame a ceremony." The words left her without trembling. The glowing circle around her brightened, and the sealed presence inside her pressed gently against her ribs, like a wolf placing its head against the other side of a door. Vanessa's composure cracked. "This is manipulation. Can no one else feel it? She is influencing him. She is influencing all of you." Margaret looked toward the moonstone, then at Alexander. "The seal is weakening. Not because Emily is forcing it. Because the king is remembering." Emily turned to Alexander. "What does that mean?" For the first time since she had met him, he looked uncertain. Not weak. Never weak. But shaken in a way that made him seem less like a throne and more like a man carrying a wound he had never been allowed to name. He reached inside his jacket and removed a small silver token on a chain. It was old, scratched, and marked with the same 3 curved lines beneath a full moon. "My mother gave me this before she died," he said. "She told me that one day my wolf would recognize what the court taught the kingdom to forget." Emily's pendant pulled toward the token. The 2 pieces glowed across the space between them, bright enough to paint Alexander's face in silver. The pressure of his alpha madness, always coiled beneath his control, eased so suddenly that several wolves in the room inhaled at once. Emily felt it too, a knot in the air untying. The presence inside her lifted its head. Margaret whispered, "The white moon Luna was never meant to rule alone. She was meant to steady the Alpha King, and he was meant to protect her until her wolf could return." Vanessa stepped backward again, and this time fear showed plainly. Not fear of Emily's power, fear of exposure. The moonstone flared beneath the Hale name, then revealed one final line, carved in silver light below all the others. Evelyn sealed her daughter from those who smiled at court while selling her bloodline for power. Emily looked at Vanessa. Vanessa looked away. That was confession enough. Ryan took another step toward the circle, desperation breaking through polish. "Emily, please. Think about what this means. If you choose him, Silverpine loses everything." Emily stood slowly. The white gown fell around her ankles. The pendant hovered against her palm, warm and alive. For the first time in her life, she did not feel small in a room full of wolves. "Silverpine lost me first," she said. The silver eye inside her opened wider. Somewhere deep beneath the seal, a wolf breathed her name. Ryan's words hung in the moon chamber like smoke, but they no longer filled Emily's lungs. "Silverpine lost me first." She had said it quietly, yet the stone carried it, the moon carried it, and every wolf in the room seemed to hear more than the words. The glowing circle around her softened from blinding silver to a steady halo, and for the first time since the trial began, Emily could feel the difference between being watched and being seen. Ryan stood at the edge of the light, his expression stripped of polish. Without the certainty of his future, without Vanessa's perfect hand on his arm, without a pack ready to applaud his choices, he looked younger than she remembered and smaller than she had feared. "Emily," he said, and the old familiarity in his voice tried to reach for the part of her that had once waited for him behind training fields and ceremony doors. "I made a mistake. I was pressured by the elders. Vanessa's family offered Silverpine an alliance. You know what it is like to be trapped by duty." Emily looked at him for a long moment. Her chest did not twist the way it used to. The mate bond between them, already torn by his rejection, felt like a loose thread around her heart, irritating more than painful. "Duty did not make you call me unfit," she said. "Duty did not make you let them laugh." Ryan's jaw trembled. Behind him, Vanessa whispered his name sharply, a warning dressed as affection. He ignored her. "Let me challenge the rejection. Under old law, if the first bond was severed under false understanding, it can be reopened before final acceptance. We can fix this before Silverpine is disgraced." There it was. "Not before you are hurt. Not before I lose you. Before Silverpine is disgraced." Emily almost smiled, but there was no bitterness left in her strong enough to become one. Alexander stood several feet away, silent and rigid, his wolf bright behind his eyes. Every instinct in him seemed focused on Ryan, but he did not move. He had promised without words that Emily would choose for herself, and he was keeping that promise even when restraint cost him. Lord Hartwell seized the moment, rising from his council seat with a face too composed to be innocent. A challenge may be legally appropriate. If Miss Carter's status has changed, Silverpine has a right to petition for restoration of its original bond. Margaret turned on him. You mean to hand her back to the very pack named by the Moonstone? I mean to preserve order, Hartwell snapped. Alexander's voice cut through the room, colder than the cliffs outside. Order built on erased records, hidden graves, and a girl shamed into silence is not order. It is rot wearing a crown. The chamber went silent. Hartwell flushed, but before he could answer, Vanessa stepped forward. The sweetness had left her face now. She looked beautiful still, but sharp, all edges beneath white silk. If His Majesty speaks of crowns, perhaps we should ask why he is so eager to protect her. The stone claims she steadies royal madness. Convenient. A girl appears, his condition improves, and suddenly law bends around her. Murmurs stirred. Emily felt Alexander's control tighten, the air pressing inward. Vanessa smiled as if she had found the crack. Maybe she is not the victim here. Maybe she is exactly what Evelyn was accused of being. A Luna who can influence alpha blood. Alexander took one step, and the moonlight across the floor flashed silver in warning. Emily moved first. She turned toward him, not touching him, only meeting his eyes. Breathe, she thought, the way he had told her. His gaze locked on hers. The pressure eased. The court saw it. Vanessa saw it too, and triumph sparked in her expression. There, you all saw that. One look, and he obeys. Emily faced her then, and the sealed wolf inside her breathed again, slow and calm. No, Emily said. He chose restraint. The difference landed harder than she expected. A few counselors looked away. Alexander's face shifted, just slightly, as if she had named something he had been denied for years. Not control forced upon him, but trust offered and returned. Emily stepped out of the glowing circle. The light followed her only as far as the moonstone's edge, then stayed behind like a witness. You want everyone to fear what I might be, she said to Vanessa. Because fear is easier than confession. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. I have nothing to confess. The moonstone pulsed beneath the Hale name. Emily looked at it, then back at Vanessa, then stand on it. The chamber froze. Vanessa did not move. Ryan turned toward her slowly. Vanessa? Her. Silence was the first honest thing she had offered all night. Hartwell lifted a hand. This trial concerns Miss Carter, not Lady Hale. Alexander's smile was faint and merciless. Old Moon law permits any named bloodline to answer the stone. You insisted on the old laws, Lord Hartwell. Margaret folded her hands, and for the first time, satisfaction touched her tired face. He is correct. Vanessa looked around the chamber, searching for support and finding only calculation. No one wanted to stand beside a lie while the moonstone was awake. At last, she lifted her chin. I will not dignify a servant girl's accusation. Emily felt the words pass over her without cutting. Servant girl. Wolfless. Defective. Dangerous. The names no longer fit. Ryan stepped back from Vanessa as if he finally smelled smoke from a house he had helped build. Did your family know? He asked. Vanessa's mouth tightened. Do not be naive. Every powerful family knows something. That is how power survives. The confession was not complete, but it was enough to change the room. Whispers rose, sharper this time. Hartwell sat down slowly. Alexander turned to his captain. Record her words. Vanessa's eyes flashed. You cannot punish me for protecting my bloodline. Emily answered before Alexander could. No, but the court can stop pretending you came here to protect anyone else. Ryan looked at Emily again, and this time his desperation had lost its costume. Please, if I lose Silverpine, I lose everything. The mate thread around Emily's heart pulled faintly, not with love, but with the memory of having once wanted to be wanted. She understood then that accepting his rejection had not been enough. He had cut the bond to shame her. She had to cut the shame to free herself. Emily walked to the center of the moonstone. Ryan Blackwood, she said, her voice steady beneath the dome. Last night you rejected me before our pack. You named me wolfless, unfit, and unworthy. Do you deny it? His face crumpled around pride. No, say it. Emily, do not make me. You made me stand there while everyone heard you. Now they will hear the truth from you." The moon chamber held its breath. Ryan swallowed. "I rejected you because I believed you had no wolf." The stone flickered. Emily waited. His eyes closed. "And because I wanted the alliance Vanessa offered." The flicker became a blaze. Around the council circle, Silverpine elders lowered their heads. Emily nodded once, though something in her chest ached for the girl who had needed this truth years ago. "I accept your rejection," she said. The old thread tightened. "And I reject the shame you gave me." The bond snapped without sound. No pain followed. Only space. Clean, open space where grief had lived too long. Ryan staggered, catching himself on the council rail, his alpha aura dimming as the moon stone judged the truth he had spoken. Silverpine's crest, embroidered on the elders' cloaks, dulled from silver to gray. Margaret whispered, "The heir bond has been revoked." Ryan stared at his hands as if power might return by wishing. Vanessa backed away from him, already abandoning a sinking throne. Emily turned from them both. Alexander stood at the edge of the stone, not reaching, not claiming, not taking the choice from the woman everyone had tried to own through shame, law, fear, or regret. Then, before the entire royal court, the Alpha King lowered himself to one knee. A sound rippled through the chamber, shock and disbelief wrapped together. Kings did not kneel. Alpha Kings least of all. Alexander did. His silver eyes never left Emily's face. "Emily Carter," he said, his voice deep enough to tremble through the stone, "not as a discarded mate, not as a hidden bloodline, not as a weapon against my madness, and not as proof against your enemies. As yourself. Will you choose me?" Emily's breath caught. The sealed wolf inside her pressed gently against the door, not demanding, only waiting. For once, no one spoke for her. No father, no pack, no council, no man with a crown. The choice stood before her, terrifying and beautiful because it was hers. She stepped toward Alexander and placed her hand in his. The moment their fingers touched, the Luna mark bloomed at the base of her throat in silver light, bright as moonrise after years underground. The court fell to its knees, one by one, not because Alexander ordered them, but because the moonstone did. For several seconds after the court fell to its knees, no one spoke. The moon chamber was filled only with the quiet hum of the awakened stone and the sound of Emily Carter trying to breathe through a lifetime changing shape around her. Alexander still knelt before her, his hand warm around hers, the silver Luna mark glowing at the base of her throat like moonlight beneath skin. He did not pull her closer. He did not claim victory. He waited, his head slightly bowed, as if the most powerful man in the kingdom understood that this moment belonged first to the girl everyone had tried to name before she could name herself. Then the moonstone brightened, and the chamber doors opened on their own. A line of light moved across the floor toward the old oath stone at the rear of the court, the black pillar where royal witnesses swore truth under moon law. Margaret Vale stepped forward, carrying Evelyn Carter's sealing cloth in both hands. The cloth unfolded in the air without wind, and the pale thread stitched through it began to shine. Not decoration. Words. A memory oath written in Luna blood. Evelyn's voice filled the chamber, soft, tired, and heartbreakingly clear. "If this oath wakes, then my daughter has survived long enough for the moon to find her." Emily's hand flew to her mouth. Alexander rose beside her, but kept his fingers loosely around hers, not holding her in place, only reminding her she was not alone. The cloth shimmered, and the court saw a memory form above the oath stone. Evelyn, pale and beautiful, standing in a winter nursery with a newborn wrapped in white. Margaret was there, younger, weeping silently. Thomas Carter stood near the door, terrified. Evelyn pressed the crescent pendant to the baby's chest and whispered the forbidden song. Silver light flowed from mother to child, not a curse but a seal, wrapping the infant's wolf in safety. "They will call her Wolfless," Evelyn's memory said, voice breaking. "Let them. Better a hidden queen than a hunted child." Another image rose, council seals stamped over birth records, the names Hale, Hartwell, Blackwood, and 3 Silverpine elders bound together by a private treaty. Lord Hartwell gripped his chair, face gray. Vanessa stared at the memory as if beauty and denial could still save her. The oath stone showed the treaty next, not in a speech, but in signatures glowing one by one. The agreement was simple and unforgivable: erase the white moon line, divide its lands, and ensure no Luna of that blood ever reached the throne, because such a Luna could steady the royal Alpha without council control. Alexander's face went still. Everyone in that chamber understood at once. His madness had not been fate. It had been useful. A suffering king was easier to advise, easier to isolate, easier to keep dependent on the same council that had hidden the one bloodline born to help him. The final memory showed Thomas Carter taking Evelyn's child away under cover of snow while Evelyn stayed behind to draw the hunters from the trail. Emily did not see the end, only the choice. Her mother had not abandoned her. Her mother had hidden her with the only protection left. A lie cruel enough that no ambitious family would look twice at a girl called defective. The oath stone dimmed, and Emily turned to her father, who had been brought into the chamber by royal guards during the trial's final moments. Thomas Carter stood broken open by truth, tears cutting through the lines of his face. "I promised her," he whispered. "I promised I would keep you unnoticed." Then years passed, and fear became easier than love. "I let them shame you because shame kept you alive. I told myself that was protection." Emily's chest ached, but the ache no longer owned her. "Protection without tenderness is still a cage," she said. Thomas bowed his head, and for the first time in her life, her father knelt to her. Not to the Luna mark, not to the bloodline, to the daughter he had failed. Around him, the Silverpine elders followed, slow and trembling. Ryan was last. His face was hollow as he sank to one knee, the revoked heir bond visible in the dull gray of his pack crest. Vanessa remained standing until the moonstone pulsed beneath the Hale name, and the court's attention turned on her like a door locking. Alexander spoke then, not loudly, but with a king's finality. Lord Hartwell and every counselor named by the stone were stripped of title pending full judgment under moon law. The Silverpine elders who concealed the treaty were removed from authority and ordered to restore all lands and records belonging to the White Moon line. Ryan Blackwood lost his claim as alpha heir, not because Emily wanted revenge, but because the Oath Stone had shown he chose alliance over bond and ambition over truth. Vanessa Hale was denied Luna status in every recognized pack and placed under royal sanction until her family's stolen holdings were returned. No chains, no spectacle, just power leaving the hands that had misused it, in front of the people they had lied to. Vanessa's face crumpled when no one stepped forward to defend her. Ryan looked at Emily once, as though asking for the mercy he had not given. Emily did not look away. That was her mercy. She let him see that she was whole without him. Then Alexander ordered the court doors opened to the gathered packs outside. Word had spread through the palace, and hundreds stood in the snow-dusted courtyard beneath the full moon. Royal wolves, Silverpine members, servants, guards, families who had grown up hearing that White Moon blood was cursed. Emily walked out beside Alexander, still barefoot, still in the white trial gown, her Luna mark shining at her throat. The cold bit her skin, but she did not shrink. In the front row stood people from Silverpine who had laughed the night Ryan rejected her, women who had called her unwanted, men who had said she would never be more than a quiet burden. One by one, they lowered their heads, then their knees. The reversal did not roar. It fell like snow, silent and complete. Emily Carter, the Wolfless Girl, stood before them as the court herald read the restored record aloud. Daughter of Evelyn of the White Moon line, heir preserved by blood seal, true Luna recognized by moonstone and oath. When the herald finished, Alexander turned to Emily in front of them all. The courtyard held its breath. He removed the royal claiming ring from his own hand, a band of silver carved with wolves and moonflowers, and placed it on his open palm. "Emily," he said, and his voice carried across the snow, "the court has recognized you. The moon has named you. Your enemies have answered. None of that gives me the right to claim you. If you want time, you will have it. If you want freedom beyond these walls, I will guard the road myself. If you choose me, it will be because your heart is yours to give." Tears warmed Emily's eyes, but they did not feel like weakness. She looked at the palace, the court, the pack that had rejected her, the father who had failed her, the king who had knelt. Then she listened inward. The sealed door inside her opened at last, not with force, but with recognition. Her wolf stepped into her awareness like moonlight entering a dark room, white as winter, calm as truth, ancient and young all at once. Emily smiled through the tears. I choose you, she said. Not because you found my worth, but because you gave me space to find it too. Alexander's control broke only in his eyes. He took her hand and slid the ring onto her finger. The Luna mark flared, and the mating bond formed not as a chain, but as a bridge, silver and warm between two souls who had both been used by lies and freed by truth. He leaned forward, touching his forehead to hers in the old royal claiming vow, gentle, public, and sacred. No command, no possession, a promise. My Luna by your choice, he whispered. Her wolf answered his with a howl that rolled through the courtyard, and every wolf present bowed beneath the moon. Spring came early that year, not in weather, because the northern cliffs kept their snow well into March, but in the kingdom. The council seats were rebuilt with oath stones at their center, so no bloodline could be erased by ink and fear again. Silverpine Pack chose a new alpha by open challenge and public vote, and the first law Emily signed as Luna Queen forbade any child from being branded defective for a late or hidden wolf. Margaret became keeper of restored histories. Thomas Carter lived quietly on White Moon Land, spending his remaining years returning every memory he had buried, never asking forgiveness as a right, only receiving what Emily chose to give. Ryan left Silverpine without title, and Vanessa. Hale watched her family's stolen estates become schools and healing houses for packless children. As for Emily, she no longer walked with her eyes on the floor. On the night of the first full moon after her coronation, she stood on the palace balcony in a white cloak edged with silver, Alexander beside her, his madness quiet for the first time in years, his hand resting lightly near hers until she chose to take it. Below them, the court knelt not in fear, but in loyalty. Snow drifted through moonlight. Wolves howled from the cliffs to the pine forests beyond. Emily touched the Luna mark at her throat and thought of her mother's song, not as a warning now, but as a blessing. Once, they had called her wolfless because they could not see the queen hidden in her blood. Now the whole kingdom saw her, and Emily Carter finally saw herself.